In 1997, over 12,000 battle-eager fans looked on as Oscar De La Hoya and Pernell Whitaker faced off in a fight billed as pound for pound. Ranked as Ring Magazine's number 2 and number 3 fighters on the pound-for-pound list, the Bout's moniker wasn't simply marketing. Oscar was seen as the rising young star of boxing. The Golden Boy was a natural left-hander who fought from a tall, orthodox stance with his left foot forward. This placed his dominant hand in the front position, letting him slam piston-like jabs into his opponents, the impact looking like a power punch rather than a rangefinder. In addition, he possessed a sleeping pill left hook, and he could use it to one-shot or plant rapid-fire combinations on overwhelmed opposition. He had the smarts to spot his opponent's defensive failings and the power to deliver consequences. This was easily the biggest test that De La Hoya had ever seen. Sweat Pea hadn't been without a world title for nearly 10 years. His in-ring performances were nothing short of art. And while this is the point where I would normally go into specifics, breaking down Sweat Pea's style, I honestly don't want to ruin the fight for you, because the first few rounds of this very fight, Whitaker displays some of the most impressive defensive mastery ever seen. De La Hoya would need to ascend to another level if he hoped to win. From the opening bell, Whitaker got to work with an active jab that poked, prodded, and punished his younger opponent. He carved his lead glove over Oscar's shoulder and sheared through the inside to the head and body. He stayed unpredictable, doubling up lead hand attacks and feinting to obscure his lightning-quick footwork. But this was nothing in comparison to Whitaker's defense. Seemingly defying physics, he managed to pull back in the middle of a shuffle, using the tilt of his hips to counterbalance him like a pendulum. He cross-stepped to circle while using insane head positions to avoid punches, like a southpaw Muhammad Ali, snaking through and around the futile offense of a befuddled De La Hoya. After overcommitting on his left cross, Whitaker seemed completely out of options. Miraculously, he dipped hard to the outside, split-stepping to lateral shift into an orthodox stance to escape at an angle. While all this was happening, Pernell was building mid and close-range offense off of his jab. If he landed on the outside of Oscar's shoulder, he could control his lead arm or head, framing, pulling, and leaning on his opponent or whipping him into his left hand with a collar tie. If Pernell's jab slid inside of De La Hoya's lead arm, he was better set up to find angles to attack Oscar's rear side. Tucking his head into his right shoulder to stay safe, he could go to work with his rear hand at close range. While the Golden Boy tried to clear him away from close range with uppercuts, Whitaker usually pulled back as soon as he felt the separation. Even though many of these didn't land, they weren't without merit. In an illustration of defense through offense, the threat of the uppercut kept Whitaker from camping out on the inside too long. But as often happens with opposite-stanced fighters, the close-range head positions led to an unintentional headbutt in round 3. Under a widely criticized WBC rule, this would cost Whitaker a point. But even so, the close-range tactics seemed worth it. But despite all these early successes, Pernell had a major problem that was brewing just under the surface. While it had gone unnoticed by most, the issue was getting worse and worse by the moment. And by round 4, it became painfully clear. Back in round 2, Oscar found success countering Whitaker's jab with a stiff cross. Unfortunately for Sweat Pea, his jab served as the framework for the rest of his offense. De La Hoya got better and better at punishing Pernell's jab, threatening to remove Whitaker's most important weapon from play. To make matters worse, the Golden Boy started dialing in his own defense, working out the distance to stay just out of range and slip or duck away. Since he had simplified the terms, De La Hoya was able to maintain solid foot positioning, a stable base, and clear vision. So even with Whitaker's tricky footwork, Oscar could now match his movement and follow him, the rapid angle changes no longer catching him off guard.
It looks as though neither guy is afraid of the other. Good left uppercut by De La Hoya. That one rocked Whitaker back. Another left hook by De La Hoya.
And by the end of round 4, Oscar was the one playing with angles. The Golden Boy switched to a southpaw stance to throw a rattling left hand. Then, using his left arm to lift Whitaker's chin, he followed with a tight, cracking right hook that turned Sweat Pea's head like an owl. Whitaker played it off as he walked back to his corner. But antics aside, the punch scored big and let him know that De La Hoya was here to win. In round 5, Whitaker tried leading with his cross instead of his jab, Express delivering a solid punch to De La Hoya's chin. Not to be undone, the Golden Boy surged forward with whistling leather, unwilling to let the blow go unanswered. But Whitaker wasn't giving Oscar a return address. He floated away, displaying defensive mastery as he ducked and pulled with each alternate step. Upon retaking center ring, Whitaker connected with blunt force counters that shook De La Hoya down to his boots. As it turned out, even without leveraging the full power of his jab, Whitaker could rely on his unmatched evasiveness and unpredictable shot selection. But he wasn't having it all his way. Oscar was able to stifle some of Whitaker's movement with long hooks to the body, similar to what Barrera did to Prince. Even still, many of his punches just weren't finding their targets. Perhaps this was why, in the closing moments of round 5, Oscar returned to a southpaw stance. With Whitaker's lead arm and shoulder out of the way, De La Hoya found a clear path for his right-handed jab.
Well, he's a natural left-hander, Rich, so it appears that he's comfortable switching over.
No, it's not anything we've seen before from De La Hoya, so it's an unusual bit of strategy. Now the two trying to psych each other out. That punch taken on the shoulder. Whitaker misses as the round comes to an end.
This was enough success to convince Oscar to remain in southpaw for the majority of the 6th round, to the great dismay of ringside announcer Larry Merchant.
Saw Marvin Hagler blow the first 4 rounds of his fight against Sugar Ray Leonard playing around with a southpaw style.
He began with a solid right lead hook and followed with a straight left that crashed into Whitaker's gloves. From there, he continued to land jabs and hooks, greatly troubling the longtime champ.
Good combination inside.
And that's the odds that De La Hoya was favored by. Whitaker wild and then runs into a left hook from De La Hoya, partially taken on his glove.
But in the last minute, it became clear that Whitaker had already solved De La Hoya's southpaw puzzle. So sensing that the novelty and success were wearing off, the Golden Boy reverted back to orthodox.
De La Hoya trying to counter off that jab now. Nice punch by Whitaker. Oh, that's a clever bit of work by Whitaker. Mills Lane didn't like it because what he did was he turned De La Hoya, got behind him, and then was hitting him from the side.
Oh, big right hand by De La Hoya to end the round.
Over the next few rounds, the fight got into a regular groove, each man capturing slivers of success as the minutes and seconds ticked by. The most impactful new development was that Oscar found he could build on his counter cross with the jaw-rattling lead hook. The saying goes that defense is its own reward, but while Whitaker was avoiding a lot of punches, Oscar was still landing. Oscar's counter crosses and jabs were far less captivating, but they were scoring. While Whitaker could use footwork and head movement that were close cousins to Ali's circling dance, he was missing a critical component of the greatest, the jab. Without finding a way to return fire, Whitaker was merely performing, while Oscar was competing.
For this one, and all of those excuses of the past fights in recent years when he hasn't looked that good simply don't apply here tonight.
If not in the best condition of his life, certainly right up there amongst it.
But that all changed in round 9. The crowd got a taste of the high drama only possible inside of the squared circle. De La Hoya returned to southpaw, hoping to regain his earlier successes. He bounded forward with a hard 1-2, but Whitaker pulled back, taking a wide, stable stance. As the two collided, it was Oscar, the bigger man, who was momentarily knocked out of step, creating just enough room for Whitaker to sneak a smashing lead hook into the Golden Boy's chin. Oscar hit the deck, but was up right away, and most observers, professional and casual, were entirely uncertain if it was a slip or a knockdown. But the only opinion that mattered was referee Mills Lane, who judged it a knockdown and began to count. Whether or not the shot damaged Oscar was in question, but Whitaker seemed to think so, landing another beautiful hook as the pair separated from the clinch. But De La Hoya wanted the round back. With less than 10 seconds, he pursued Whitaker, hurling fists of frustrated fury. But to add insult to possible injury, Whitaker seemed to activate Ultra Instinct, avoiding every single desperate punch. In comparison to the action-filled previous rounds, the 10th stanza had considerably slower pace and tempo. But if either or both were taking a break in preparation for the upcoming rounds, they unanimously decided to go back to work near the tail end, each man looking to make a last-minute impression on the judges' scorecards. If the two had conserved energy in the 10th, they spent that excess and more in the 11th. De La Hoya tripped during an exchange as Whitaker cut to the outside. As Oscar was rising back to his feet, Whitaker gave a sly look to the camera as if to say, "I've got him." Believing De La Hoya was wilting, he pounced, aggressively pressing into the clinch to land sturdy shots to the head and body. But Oscar came right back. Then bounced up and down on his toes, as if to prove he still had his legs underneath of him. From that point on, despite being so late in the fight, the two went to war, neither willing to back down as the championship title remained up for grabs.
The left hand. De La Hoya throwing in combinations as the two mix it up. De La Hoya flurrying late again, trying to steal the round on the judges' cards.
Up to this point, the fight had been convoluted, messy, and at times highly competitive. So both athletes must have known they needed to make a definitive statement before the closing bell. De La Hoya chased Whitaker around the ring, slinging wide hooks into his opponent's sides and stomach. Whitaker, on the other hand, displayed his incredible defensive mastery.
We may have a situation at the end of this fight where each fighter in each camp feels it has won. We're barely past the halfway point, and the round is still up for grabs. Maybe the fight. I suspect in the final 30 seconds they'll both open up. Final seconds of the fight. Here's the end of the fight. The guys look as though they enjoyed. They go into...
The legendary champion wore a face of shock as Michael Buffer announced that Oscar De La Hoya had captured the welterweight crown via unanimous decision.
He had a nice jab. That's a real good jab. I give him a lot of credit for that. But I thought I pulled enough to win the fight.
In the post-fight interview with Larry Merchant, Whitaker was emphatic.
I should have gotten 10 out of 12 rounds. You know, it was unbelievable. It was a shutout. It was a blowout, shutout. It was a shutout. What else could I do? I couldn't perform any better than that without getting hit.
Many in the crowd and the majority of media scorecards agreed with the legendary champion. Fortunately for De La Hoya, the ringside judges saw it differently. With welterweight title in hand, the Golden Boy continued onto what would be one of the most legendary careers in boxing history. But I'm curious, who do you think won this fight? Let everyone know in the comments below so we can do what boxing fans do best and argue about it for days. If you'd like to learn more about the sweet science or other forms of combat sport, you can check out my skill building technique books, linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.